Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second iteration of our The Art of Public Speaking event. We are excited to hear from our experts, Valentina and Andy, this evening. Valentina Davila is a Canadian-Venezuelan architect and architectural historian, finishing her PhD at McGill University's School of Architecture. In the fall of 2023, she will begin teaching at Carleton University in Ottawa. She uses oral history as a research method and enjoys teaching and mentoring. In addition, Valentina is a social justice activist and a fierce advocate for parent-student rights. Since 2010, Dr. Andy Churchill's work has focused on helping academics communicate their research more effectively. His work includes teaching classes, running workshops, and coaching researchers to present their work more effectively within and beyond academia. He is the primary speaking coach at numerous events, including the International 3-Minute Thesis Research Competition, where in 2022, one of his students, Atya Amin, won the North American Championships after having won the Canadian National event. And now I will pass it off to Valentina.
Thank you very much, Catherine, Constantina, Sina, and Kay for the invitation and for your service for us, the McGill alumni. I'm going to start right away and I'm going to put my minutes. So this is one of a very important tool that you can see for presentation and staying on time. So thank you everyone for being here. So my name is Valentina. I'm from Venezuela, a country in South America. Therefore, I speak Spanish as a first language. English is my second language. I'm an architect, an architectural historian, McGill alumni. I finished my master's in architectural history and theory in 2014. I'm an educator, which is the most important part, I think, of my career, is transmitting my message, and an activist for many, many causes. I'm also an extrovert, which is also associated with public speaking. But I am here to say that public speaking is not about being extrovert. It's not only about being an extrovert, because it's not exclusively a field of extroverts. Most people will need to have many episodes of public speaking in their lives. So it's important to understand that this belongs to all of us. It's an important part of, remember that, it's just a part of effective communication. So it's not about you, it's about your message. It's about what you have to say. And we all know, especially women of color, we know today how important it is to use our whatever power we have to give a message that is important to us. And it's a message to make our world more diverse. So I'm going to structure my presentation in 3 parts. Remember the colors: message, the skill, and finally tips. So when I arrive at purple, that means that I'm about to be done. So let's start with the message, the voice. I've been in architecture for a very long time. Since 2001, I've been learning architecture this way. These are fantastic buildings, very important part of our history, the world's heritage, but I just couldn't find my place there. I didn't have a message. Until 2014, so very recently. I don't think I could have given a talk like this if you consider that this was the architecture I learned throughout my life. I don't think I would be talking about public speaking or very interested in teaching or transmitting any sort of message until I met my advisor in a public speaking event. I heard her, I knew she came from McGill, and she taught me that there's something called everyday architecture, architecture without architects, or cultural landscapes. So since 2015, I have a lot to say. So I have devoted my career, and this is not the topic of today's lecture, so I'm just gonna run by it. I've devoted my career to studying domestic workers and their relationship with space, with building the Venezuelan and the Latin American landscape. So since 2015, I've been doing research in Venezuela. I've been doing research anywhere there are domestic workers. I've been there, even in Canada, at McGill, some of McGill's houses. And I have spent many months in Venezuela through basically a civil war, food shortages. I've taken my kids. I've also left my kids in Canada. I've worked with these women. They have been generous enough to open their doors and their hearts and give me their time. So I needed to polish my public speaking abilities and the skill of public speaking, because this is not about me. This is about a message. So every time I go to an event and I get the most valuable currency that we have today, that is people's attention. I know I have to honor my commitment with my research, with domestic workers, with architecture, and I have learned how to become a good public speaker, and we'll see more about that. But what I want to say, this is about your message, about giving the seriousness that your message needs. So I've done that. I presented my work in many conferences, public events, even children's school, and I've been a successful public speaker. But as I said from the beginning, public speaking is an important part of effective communication. So it's time to understand how it is to learn a skill. Unfortunately, as good as I was at public speaking and polishing my natural extroversion, I was not really great at writing. It took a big part of me to just write an email. I was terrified of it. So I do understand the anxiety associated to not controlling a skill, not controlling a medium of communication. I couldn't even write a message. I would do all the work to just ask my colleagues, could you just send a message? I started to receive a lot of rejections for conferences because I couldn't articulate my message through writing, rejection for publications. And, there is two sides to effective communication. Public speaking is one and writing is another. And apparently no one is perfect. So I understand the fears and the anxieties associated to having your heart beat because you don't know how to do something, having your voice muted because you just haven't learned or mastered a skill. And I also learned about the power of self-compassion and saying, it's fine. It's just something that I need to learn. These are the two faces of Valentina, the one that really enjoys public speaking and the one that really dreads writing about it. So I understand what people who are afraid of public speaking go through. But again, this is not about you or me. This is about your message and what you have to say to the world, what you want to put out there. So I did what I needed to do, and I started to learn the skill of writing. I needed to control my narrative. I needed to take my message and deliver it to the world in other format that it wasn't only public speaking. So I took books of advice. McGill, the Graphos, the writing center was very helpful. And I wanted to write my dissertation by hand. Imagine how it goes. So I studied a lot on how to become a better writer. And I let others help me, guide me, and help me find my voice. And these are amazing women whose scholarship have really changed the way I see architectural history and can communicate it. But guess what? I needed to write. I needed to organize my thoughts. So I started recording myself during public speaking events or doing private speaking events in my house to understand how my brain worked in storytelling. That is my favorite way of presenting. So I'm going to give you a minute to think, out of these 4 publications, how do they relate to public speaking? I put a little star there. So just imagine you move the star and tell me how many of these 4 have been a direct result of a public speaking event where I presented my work. All of them. So what I want to say is that public speaking and writing are 2 sides of a coin, and the coin is effective communication. And I'm sure that those who are terrified of public speaking are great writers, because this is what I've observed. And we can learn, we can find our voice and deliver our message to the world. I was able to learn how to write. I'm a decent writer, I'm a good public speaker, and I was able to transmit my voice. And recently this year, this is not to toot my own horn, but to tell you that overcoming your fears and accepting your anxieties and loving yourself, regardless of how difficult some days are, it's going to give you great results. This is me. I won an award for the best article published in 2022 by the organization that I admire the most, and my work has been funded by the Canadian government, by the Canadian Centre for Architecture, and they have heard what I have to say. So I am going to give you some tips and tricks on how to improve your public speaking skills. I once went to an event where I wanted to improve my writing skills, and the writer basically said, I was born like this. I was born very talented. And now I remember, and I'm like, okay. So to his defense, he wasn't talking about public speaking, but I couldn't learn anything from him. So now I'm trying to leave you with some specific messages on how to hone your practice, your public speaking practice, by using my example of how I honed my writing skills. So effective public speaking, it's a skill. You can learn it, you can master it, and you can become the greatest public speaker if you so decide. I trust you. The passion for a message will get you anywhere. So you can learn, you can prepare, and then practice, which is part of preparation. So all of these can wrap up in be prepared. Learn the basics. One thing that I learned from advice on writing is that most books have several overlapping messages. In public speaking, storytelling is a great way of captivating your audience. And another advice is have a sense of humor. Make people laugh at yourself. You're not funny. People often tell me, I am not funny. I have a tip. Plant people in the audience, pay them or ask them or trade them for favors to laugh at your jokes and ask interesting questions. I do it all the time. Here are my kids. I bring them to all my public speaking events and pay them $5. Also learn from others. This is my advice. This is what Andy is here for. He's here in Montreal. He has a whole company devoted to that. This is why McGill Young Alumni put together this event for you to learn. And it's mostly free today. Here's my advisor in one of the best public speaking events that I've been, standing ovation, Michelle Obama, of course. There are certain books. You won't have to take all the advice from all the books, but some of it will speak to you. TikTok, I love it. I've heard so many public speaking tips on TikTok that I love it. And come to events like this one. Honor your voice. Celebrate the diversity. Celebrate what makes you you. I'm Valentina Davila. I'm not a product of Silicon Valley. I don't want to be Kim Kardashian. Imagine, my mom always told me, imagine all the flowers in the world were white. What kind of world would that be? Imagine all the public speaking events you went were TED Talks or academic presentations where people read like robots. No, learn, take what works for you and plant your own powerful, colorful garden. Know your topic, know your audience, know yourself. I don't have much more time, so I'm going to skip through these, and you can screenshot them later when you see this recording. Know your topic. I know you know that already. I read like 20 books for this presentation. Know your audience. Are they children? Are they elder? Are you going to talk to people who basically have a problem with what you're going to say? Know your audience. Know yourself extra edition. That's that people like me. Prepare for the allotted time. Always respect the time that was given to you. Prepare for less. Set your own visual reminders that you need to finish. Always keep a script in hand so you know where you are. And know yourself, nervous edition. I don't like this advice of overcoming fear, mastering fear, conquering fear. No, accept your fear. Make it your best friend, like Buddhist monks say, and just work with it. Love yourself, accept yourself, and always write a comprehensive script. They say not to read, but if you block, then always prepare for a plan B. Read, record yourself, but learn what are your fears and what are your best qualities. So it's not about being perfect. It's about being brave and taking your message there. And if Queen Elizabeth could admit her flaws, so can we. Thank you very much. Now it's time for Andy to guide us through professional public speaking.
Valentina, you set a high bar for me to follow. I so appreciate that you said public speaking is not just for extroverts. I'm actually not an extrovert. People think I am. People think I actually love public speaking. And I have a bit of a secret to tell you. I don't love public speaking. I'm just going to check in here as we go and see if we've been pinned. Have you pinned us? There we go. All right. back on speaker view. I apologize. So I want to share a quick story with you. The very first grad student class I taught, I've been teaching undergrads for a little while. I opened up at the end, I got out my mouse and I opened up Minerva. Boom, there are the course evaluations, and boom, in full color. Actually, it's black and white, I guess. Was a comment, Andrew Churchill should never teach at McGill again. And just like Valentina's expression right there, that was the expression on my face, right? I was devastated. I was devastated. I thought I wanted to teach, and it didn't go well. The reality is the student who said that got one part of that story wrong. They should have added 2 words. This version of Andrew Churchill shouldn't teach again. Because I actually wasn't very good at it, but luckily the head of the Faculty of Education at the time, the dean, said, don't worry about it. Nobody's very good at teaching when they start. Teaching's not a gene. And presenting's the same way. Presenting is not a gene. Presenting's not something you're born good at. Although Valentina, you started high, right? But it's not about where you start. It's not about where you start. It's about where you get to. I'll tell you, 5 years after that, so 2010, I got this note, disaster. 5 years later, I won a McGill Teaching Award. And I started coaching presenters. And now I coach people all over the world. I coach international champions. I coach on the TEDx stage. I still don't love presenting. I do it, but I don't love it. I still get nervous. I even got a little nervous tonight, right? And that's actually where I want to start. Where I want to start with is a couple of anxiety tips, because anxiety is the thing that's preventing a lot of people from finding their voice, and finding your voice on public stages can open up so much. I was at an event just yesterday where Kina spoke. Kina is a PhD student from McGill who 5 years ago now, gave a SED talk. So she gave a talk on the faculty club stage. And she talked yesterday about how that talk on the faculty club stage, Stu, you'll be happy to hear this story. Stu actually recorded that talk. He's the one recording this one. She can draw a direct line from that talk on YouTube to her being shortlisted as a finalist and getting the job at McMaster's, and to her being approached by people in the private sector who are interested in the work that she's doing in sustainable engineering. So talking matters. Talking matters. And it's not where you are now. It's where you can get to, right? So if you think about who's a great public speaker, who would I like to be like? Who do I wish I was? There's nothing stopping you from becoming that person. And I love how you talked about that, Valentina, in your opening remarks. It's a process. We get better at it. It's like writing. It's just like other skills. And it's a muscle, and you have to work at it. So back to anxiety. 3 things. One is, and these are going to be, I'm going to give you really specific tips in the next 10 minutes. So 3 tips on this one. One is, I want you to have an opening move. And I want your opening move to go. So the one problem people have is they come on stage, but they don't know how to get here. They never practice getting on stage. So you need to actually practice getting on stage. And you're going to back up, and then you're going to back off stage. And when you practice your presentation, you're going to start here. And you're going to think about an audience, and you're going to walk to the middle of the room, and you're going to turn. And you're going to have a oh shit moment. You're going to take a deep breath. You may even take 2 deep breaths. And then you're going to step forward, look at the audience and start talking, or look at the camera and start talking. And that movement forward is going to be your trigger to start. So if you're being introduced, don't come to the front of the stage and let someone introduce you. Stay back here and then come forward, because what you're doing is you're tricking your brain. You're sending a signal to your brain that you're okay. We don't step into fear. So you're nervous, but your brain's having to recalculate as you step forward. Your brain's saying, oh, that person must be okay. And you're moving, and moving is good. Which brings us to tip number 2, gesture, use your hands. Use props. Use your hands. When you explain things with your hands, Valentina, we saw you do this. Even small person in a screen, your hands still came up sometimes. Your hands were still active. And this movement of our hands brings us into the moment as we start to explain something to someone. And that action of explaining something brings us into the present. And that's where we want to be. We don't want to be in our own head. We want to be with our audience. We want to be talking with our audience. So gesturing will actually help decrease your level of nervousness. Step forward and gesture, especially in the beginning, because you're having to overcome. And I'm going to give you one more trick for when you're back here off stage, before you come on the stage. Okay. I know this is a little dangerous with an audience who's listening, because I'm going to say, pull out your phone. But what I want you to do is pull out your phone, and I want you to scroll through pictures on your phone until you find someone you love and you know loves you. And it shouldn't be very hard. It's right there, right? Here we go. And while you're backstage and you're nervous, I want you to sit with that picture for a minute. And I want you to think about that moment. Because what's going to happen is you're going to know you're loved and cared for, and your brain chemistry is going to change. That's a picture of my daughter singing in a Christmas concert, right? So the volume gets turned down on everything. You need to learn to control your nervous system before you come on stage. So when you come on stage, you're not out of control. And then you're starting from a better position, right? So get a hold of your anxiety. The other thing you can do is some breathing tips. I'm not going to talk about them now, but we could talk about them. Or Valentina, I know you've done some of these. You could talk about them in the Q&A. We'll leave that as a little teaser. Okay. Now I want to give you a tip on just checking in on time here. Darn clock. And give you a little tip on the board. See if my camera's behaving on me. So you can play this little game on the board and see if you can figure out what those sentences say. Okay. This first one. Anybody got it? Less is more. Less is more. Everybody always tries to do too much. When you try and do too much, I'll show you the example I use. When people try and do an entire research journal article, this is their research journal article, right? We got background and methodology and results and discussion. And this is your audience's brain, and people try and do this. Doesn't fit. Doesn't fit. Everybody always tries to do too much. Don't try and do too much. Okay. The next one, less is more. So if you do less, that allows you to what? It's another L. Let it. What's Valentina going to talk about after? I just teased it a second ago. We're going to talk about breathing. Let it breathe. Let it breathe. You need to give your presentation time. Can't go too fast. Everybody people are going to miss it. Okay. People aren't going to keep up. And once they don't keep up anymore, they just go look at their phone. Once they don't keep up, they go to their phone. So you can't go as fast as you think you can. Okay. So that allows you to let it breathe. And the breathing is important. It's important to let it breathe because this one starts with a P. Pausing is powerful. Pausing is powerful. 3 ways you can pause. So sometimes as presenters, we ask people to think about something. And what do we usually do? We usually say, let me get you to think about something for a second. And then they keep talking. They're like, I was thinking about it. Now I'm mad at you because you didn't give me time to think about it. Or I'm thinking about what you asked me to think about and I'm no longer listening to you because I can't do both at the same time. Second way pausing is powerful. What are the 3 ways? So one is letting you think about it. The second one is building anticipation. Okay. If I've said something and you're like waiting, make you wait a little, right? Make you wait a little. Curiosity builds over time. So if I make you curious, you're gonna keep wanting to know. That's good. That's good. I want you to keep wanting to know. And the third one, I can't remember right now. That's what happens when you turn 53. You sometimes forget things. But I'll remember it during the Q&A and I'll tell you. And rather than, I was going to share some stuff on PowerPoint, but I think I'll skip that because we don't have time to go there and come back here. So let's just stay here. I'm going to give you 2 quick practice tips. People are always wondering, like, how do I build content? I'll give you two things you can do with a script. Like Valentina talked about the importance of having a script, right? So one of the things you can do with your script is test that opening. So take the opening and cut it about halfway. So whatever your opening is, if it's an opening story, if it's an opening anecdote, if it's an opening interesting statistic, if it's however you're planning to open, stop halfway. And tell them casually, like when you're sitting having a cocktail at a party or when you're having lunch with them. And then just stop and see what happens. And if they say, oh, that's kind of interesting, Valentina, let me tell you about what I do, then it didn't work. You were trying to make them curious. You were trying to make them want to learn more. So wherever you stop, you need their response to be, don't stop. You need their response to be to start asking you questions. So that's one way you can test whether or not your opening is working. As I work through my opening, do people I tell it want me to keep talking, or do they change the topic? They change the topic, no good. Second exercise you can do, get a practice audience with 2 people. Ask one person to leave the room. Tell the person who's in the room, do your presentation to the person who's in the room. Invite the person who's left the room back into the room. Have the person you gave the presentation to tell the person who left the room about your presentation. and you're not allowed to say a word for 5 minutes. So for 5 minutes, all you're allowed to do is listen to one person tell the other person about your presentation and them ask questions back and forth. It's a little uncomfortable. It's a little weird. And you will learn more about what your audience is going to understand doing this one little exercise than anything else you can possibly do. So I'm going to stop there. It's 8:30 and we're going to open it up to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Andy and Valentina. Both excellent presentations.
Put my
And
headset back in so I can hear.
yeah, and I have to admit, there's so many questions coming. And please, to all our 83 people in this amazing event, please share to me or open to everyone questions for our two speakers. And let's start. Let's drink some water and just start. So I would like to just, I'll ask questions, either of you or directed to one of you if the person asked the question is directing the question. So I would like to say in the beginning, let's say you have a brain freeze. How would you work through that? I think that's something that some people can, get worried about. You're
Have
on
what?
stage, brain freeze.
Brain freeze.
Yeah, you're there and it's happening. What do you do about it? How do you pass that phase? If you have any tips about that, Valentina?
Well, I've had students and people that I know start crying. And what really breaks my heart is that really mortifies them. It mortifies them more than it mortifies the audience. I think I always think that the audience they're rooting for you and they want you to succeed. So if someone has a brain freeze, and this is why I am against the advice of don't write a script. I think you should always bring a script, because usually people who are shy or afraid of public speaking are very methodical and organized. Use that. I'm just basing my comments on people that I know, and use that. Bring your script. Be honest, be yourself, and say, I'm sorry, I just need 1 minute. And one of the tips that I had in my tip thing is have always a glass of really cold water at hand. This is some of the advice. And drink the water and practice a minute. Ask the audience for a minute of mindfulness. Feel how the cold water goes into your system, and do the deep breathings that scientists have I guess studied that are actually working on your nervous system. So this is not like magic or anything, but it is something that has worked on your nervous system. So the most famous breathing exercise is you inhale in 4, hold your breath for 4, and exhale in 8. There are many others that you can try. So this is part of prepare. And always, if you know that you might have a panic attack, come prepared for that and be really honest to the audience and to yourself. And if you just can't go on, say it and be forever forgiveful to yourself, because these kind of things happen and you're just human and you're learning. So this is why I say, if you really feel like this is going to happen to you, I know people who are terrified and really anxious, and come prepared with a recording of yourself and tell the audience, I'm really sorry. People will understand, because fear of public speaking is not unique. It's a lot of people has it. So how about you bring a recording of yourself and say, I'm sorry, I have to pause here, but let my previous self finish this for you.
Mm-hmm. Anything you would like to add, Andy?
I think having some notes is a great suggestion. I think that learning to turn down the anxiety. So this is where both the image exercise on your phone and the breathing exercises come in.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to turn the dial on the anxiety before you get on the stage is really important. Because if you're already having an anxiety attack backstage, then when you're on stage, it's going to get worse, right? So people are like, make sure you learn to turn down that. And then I would suggest 2 things. One is be really honest with yourself about whether or not you've actually ever really prepared. because I've worked with a lot of people with anxiety, and the majority of the people that I've worked with, the beginning of the fix was, and the beginning of working through the anxiety was actually over preparing, because the anxiety stops you from preparing, and you put it off, and then you come in at the last minute, and then you're anxious, but you should be anxious because you're not prepared. So the part B of this, so that's part A. Part B is if you have done that work, if you have prepared as much as you should, as much as you could, if you have felt like, yeah, I was way over prepared and I still had a panic attack, then get some professional help. Get some professional help, because they're professionals who specialize in helping people get through this. I don't, that's not my work. But get some help so that you can get through it, because you can. And if you've done all the work to do a great job and you still have an anxiety attack, then get some help with it, so that you don't, so that you can overcome it. Because it's a terrible place to be stuck, right? A terrible place to be stuck.
Very true. I would like to shift gears a bit. And I see, Andy, you're standing. Valentina, you're probably sitting. I would like to... Oh, you're standing as well? Sorry. I mean, I just see Andy pacing a little bit more. I'm at the moment sitting. I would like to talk about non-verbal communication skills. I think we talked about written skills and public speaking, but I think a big part of it is our voice, and then our hand gestures, or in general, our non-communication skills. So on that note, I think I'll pass the mic to Andy. And yeah, thank you all for your questions, guys. I hope we can get through most of them. Keep them coming.
Your hands, can you see my board? Can you spotlight this, Stu, just so people can see it? Your hand gestures are really important, because your voice and your body language actually come from your letting yourself feel. Let yourself, okay? And this is really important when we get to voice, which is what Konstantina was just talking about. So normally what we want to do is we kind of want to be confident and authoritative. We want to sound like we know what we're talking about. But the problem is when we step on stage and we're like, oh, I want to sound confident. Confidence is actually monotone. Confidence is monotone. I want to sound professional. That's a monotonal space. So what you need to do is you need to think about things that are in a higher register. Surprised, passionate, excited. You need to think about things that are in a lower register. Sad, empathy, frustration, right? And you need to move out of just that center space into those other spaces. Because if you stay only in that center space, or if you stay only in the upper space where you're excited all the time, then that becomes too much. We can't enjoy the excited without knowing there was something else. Notice what Valentina and I both did in the stories we told, right? We told stories not only about a high moment. That's the award I got for distinguished teaching at McGill. That's a high moment, right? But it started with like, and Valentina's talked about how frustrating it was with her writing and how hard that was. And we heard that. We heard it when she said it. We need to see and we need to hear how you feel. Because without that, there's no connection. Without that, we might as well just be reading a journal article. And that's not a speech. A speech is an article delivered by a person, So the person has to be allowed into the room, or you might as well just send us the script.
I would like to interrupt for 1 second and recommend the great courses. This is one of the things that I surveyed. So the advice that Andy is giving is so great and so funded in research, and a quick way of finding answers to these specific questions. I heard a great course about this, and it tells you exactly how to move your hands, and so this is another tool that you can go to. And as Andy said, these are skills that can be learned. So it just reminded me of all the high points. So he's obviously an expert, and it comes from scientific base.
And remember what we're trying to do. It's not so much, so like gestures, for instance, it's not so, and facial expressions, we're not trying to be an actor. We're not if you want to go to acting school, go to Hollywood. What we're trying to do is let your feelings, let your authentic feelings come out. We are breathing, feeling human beings, right? We want to let that person come on stage versus, someone who's just nervous being on stage, or someone who's just trying to project confidence be on stage. The best presentations are authentic and real. They're not acting jobs. They're not acting jobs. So it's not about becoming an actor. It's about giving yourself permission. One thing you can do if you're wondering about this voice, how do I do this? How do I find my voice? Go find a child who's 3, 4, 5 years old and record yourself reading children's stories to them. Because I guarantee your voice exists, but what happens as adults is we get that voice smushed down of us, especially in academia, because we're told to just be professional and objective all the time, and we lose touch with that voice. So the best thing that ever happened to my presenting skills was having a daughter. She's 9 now. It's crazy. My voice got so much better because I started using it. And it's not that I haven't sounded tonight like a kindergarten teacher, which is what you sound like when you read children's stories to 3 and 4-year-olds. But it lets you push back on the boundaries and remember that voice that you used to have. Because as a child, we all had that voice. And then we somehow got it squished down of us. And part of what we need to do is bring it back.
I completely agree. It's crazy how we forget when we used to read books or talk to I teach kids that are 8, 9 years old, and it's so fun just interacting with them. And I do little voices here and there, and how they respond makes a whole difference. I have another question for you though. Any tips? We talked about voice, very important. Any tips on how to slow down and pace yourself while speaking? I would say, Valentina, in the beginning, you mentioned the tip of putting a time where it's somewhere visible for you. So that works for you. But if you can share, either of you, what works well and how to speak in a pace that is okay, don't overcomplicate. Valentina?
Well, based on my recent research, and by the way, if you can see my phone, or you cannot see it, there is a list of purchased requests. So McGill just acquired 15 books on public speaking. So they're there for you. They're in the McGill library. And, I just did a research for the last 2 weeks of the best, advice, and McGill just acquired them. So everything is there because we only have 1 hour. But in terms of pacing myself, I would say that's my biggest challenge, because I want to say everything. And sometimes I'm talking too much and too loud. But I read that it's when you're speaking in a conversation, that's the perfect pace. And it has been studied that speak in a conversation. So for a 10-minute presentation, it's 2,000 words. 20 minutes, 4,000 words. Usually it's so if you are going to write all of your like research, usually your research presentations, you write them. The problem is that people present them as reading a paper. And I usually tell them, this is not a paper, this is a presentation. So don't speak like you write. So the advice that I gathered from many sources is that it's 2,000 words for 10 minutes. But that is basically if you record yourself talking to a friend, telling a story, something that was so funny the other day, this is the perfect pace, is conversational. So I don't know if that gives you an answer, but perhaps you can record yourself talking to a friend and then record yourself in a presentation. If you're like, no, this is too much, then you need to slow down and maybe count how many words per minute. It's a formula, but you that's what I struggle the most. I get so excited during the time of presentation. So this is one thing. I lose total control of time. I am in a bubble where I think that what I'm saying is the most interesting thing that a human being could ever hear. And I'm sure people can sit there for an hour to listen to me. Like, why not? Well, no, it's interesting to you. And people will really appreciate if you let them out 2 minutes before, they can go grab a coffee. So for me, I get into this bubble that I disconnect from time. So this is why I need to keep tabs on myself. But keeping the speed, it's a big problem for me because I get so excited. But conversation, talk to a friend and rehearse, prepare, rehearse, record yourself, rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
Two things. One, you should be able to finish your presentation easily in 20% less time than you have. So if you're preparing a 10-minute presentation, you should be able to deliver it in 8 minutes. And then it's gone. Then you're going to let it breathe. Then you're going to relax and let it breathe. Okay. My suggestion with Valentina, my suggestion with word count is half what Valentina said, between 100 and 120 words a minute. When so if you're doing a dissertation defense, 200 words a minute, like jam it all in there, like cruise right through, because you got it, because the audience is already familiar. If you're telling a story with a friend, because they already know. But if you're giving people new information, they need processing time. And they need way more time than you think they need. So you got to slow down. You also have to change the sentence structure. So sentences need to be shorter. And there are two tricks for doing this. One is instead of pulling out your keyboard, I just pulled out my keyboard, you can't see it, and typing, record it and let some AI program, like I use Otter, but you can use Microsoft Word, you can use PowerPoint, let someone type it for you. Zoom will produce a transcript for you, so that you're not speaking written word. Because when you try and speak written word, it sounds like you're reading something that was written, because guess what? That's what you're doing. And if you have written it and you want to move from spoken to written word, here's what that looks like. So written word is on the left here. And this is usually what it comes out in a presentation. We come out in paragraphs at a time. If you go through and you highlight it, just for the really important bits, you don't need to read this. I'm going to go through it quick, right? And then you delete all the things that aren't highlighted and you spread it out on a page. This is what your presentation should sound like. It comes out in bits and pieces. We don't speak in full sentences. We speak in bits and pieces. So think about that. Shorten your sentences. And then if you are memorizing a script, if you do write a script, spread it out on the page. This one time, don't be afraid of being a little less environmental, and spread it out on a page so that as you're looking at it, you're registering the white space that it needs, right? Think about the way a blog post is written. That's the way you need to deliver a presentation, with white space. And that white space is pausing. That white space is silence. And silence is powerful.
I remember, Andy, when we were practicing for my 3-minute thesis, when I had written my script and you actually told me to make things bold, different, like all my words, just space it. It was just like block of paragraph, sorry. And like I space it out, different fonts, different bold here and there. That is how we speak after all, right? So I want to transition and ask if there are other specific tools or technologies that we could use and you find useful during your presentations. I already got a few, and that's already quite interesting. But if you have anything else to share with our audience.
For me, it's I said it before, but for me, it's all well. What my advice came from books. Like the number of words came from many books, but I have to say that these books are biased because they're not written by women of color who have an accent and who like think and express differently. So my advice would be to really, again, observe whoever you really like. And, oh, I would like to speak like this person, and analyze and take notes. And, I know a lot of people I don't like. I take notes too. Like one of the presentations, I couldn't concentrate on what she was saying because it was so rehearsed. Like I felt like, what are you doing? Like everything was so rehearsed. I just couldn't. I didn't feel it was genuine. It was just too much. And other presentations, I haven't been able to like really concentrate because of the way. So I take notes. I do this too. I should stop. So it's really low tech in terms of like always observing that person that you really like. I really like how Andy spoke. I see he paused a lot and he looked at me and he gave time to. So that for me would be the technology. But of course, for me also the best technology is recording yourself. So the technology of Zoom and analyzing. Someone is asking about the words and once I gave like the most important speech in my life about my topic, and so many and that I was like, so technology also can help you, like observing you're also yourself. You're very good. But about technologies, Andy knows more in terms of actual technology.
The best feedback program right now is a program called Yoodly with a Y, Yoodli, and it's really impressively good. It'll give you filler words, it'll give you uncertainty, it'll give you kind of low value words. So it'll give you a fair amount of feedback. It's an app you download. So it's an add-in. We could be running it right here. So I have a subscription. I could have invited Yoodli in, and then we could have done a live feedback on Valentina and on myself and see how we did. Right? See how we did. The danger is that you misinterpret it and it creates a negative feedback loop. So one of the things you need to do is make sure you're celebrating successes. As you get better, you need to celebrate the get betterness. Like my second review wasn't great, but it was a whole hell of a lot better than my first one. And I met with my dean after the second class, and he was like, look how much better it is. He didn't say, oh, this still isn't very good, Andy. He said, look at how much better it is. Because we need to create an upward spiral, especially if you're anxious. So Yoodli is a good one. Recording's great. A quick tip, if you are recording, watch it 3 times. Once with the video off, only voice. Once with the voice off, only body language. And then once with all 3.
That's
because
good.
You can't separate voice and body language. Your brain won't allow you to. So if you want to see gestures, you have to turn the volume off. And you just go through it and look at the gestures. And if you know what you're talking about, like you should be able to see your talk They're like, oh yeah, that's when I said that. Oh yeah, that's when I said that. Oh yeah, that's when I said that. And if you can't do that, then your gestures are not dynamic and not connected. And if your gestures are not dynamic and not connected, that's a huge area for you to improve and make a ton of progress.
Amazing. It's so many good things today. I don't know. Let it breathe. Presenting is not a gene. I love it. Finding our voice. We touched on so many topics: breathing technique, pausing, how to control our emotional state, hand gesture. Let me do this. Is it okay, guys? Yeah. And anxiety. I thank everyone for their questions. I'm very sorry we were not able to go through them all. I hope everyone learned something. And I will pass the mic to Catherine for final notes.
Thank you so much. I agree.
Catherine, if I could just interrupt for 1 second. If anyone has a question and you want to hop on LinkedIn and send me a DM with your question, I will answer all of your questions tomorrow before I go to sleep. I'm not going to promise to do it tonight before I go to sleep, but I promise tomorrow I'll go through anyone who sends me a question and send you an answer.
Me too. I just want to say that my watch has been telling me a lot of people have been watching my LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn is the horrible, worst version of myself. I'm an academic. I'm going to work on it. But if you write to me, but my LinkedIn is not a reflection of who I am. Yeah, no. So, but you can write me, and I promise that I'm going to fix my LinkedIn. This is a good, like now I'm like,
oh my gosh. Well, I don't know about the audience members, but I was furiously typing notes while both of you were speaking. I found both of you had such nuggets of gold in terms of information shared. I wish I heard from both of you before I finished my schooling. It would have been very handy, but anyways, it's not a lost cause. It'll help me moving forward. So I know Konstantina highlighted some important information. Honor your voice, celebrate the diversity, celebrate what makes you you. Andy, I was shocked when you shared with us last week that you're not an extrovert, because your skill in the public speaking arena, I just assumed, oh yeah, he's an extrovert. But so that's very impressive. It would take all day, but Andy, I know the 3 things in terms of anxiety: have an opening move, make that step forward, use your hands, use props, pull out your phone, find a picture of someone you love and that loves you. It'll get you in a good headspace. Less is more, let it breathe, pausing is powerful.
Hey, Catherine, you're doing this next year.
I just want to highlight I feel like I want to highlight it all, but then I'd be regurgitating and I wouldn't do it nearly as good as both of you. So,
this was really fun. Thank
Andy,
you for having
thank you,
us.
Valentina. We've definitely appreciated having your expertise here tonight. I wish we had like 2 hours, but just being mindful of time. Thank you. I also want to recognize Konstantina, Sina, Kay. It was a pleasure to organize this event with you all. And again, thank you, Valentina, Andy. It was such a pleasure to hear from you this evening. And just to remind everyone, the MYA is planning to have another event. I think it was in July or June. I think July. It'll be, anyways, follow us on socials. I think we're on Instagram, LinkedIn. We'll let you know what kind of upcoming events we're going to have. So thank you so much, and have a great evening, everyone.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.